welcome to Arts Express. This is Prairie Miller, and on the show, Pacifica host Garland Nixon tries out his theater critic hat, that is, deciphering the European theater of the absurd in D.C.
Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to chat a little bit about some of the controversial statements and controversial narratives coming out of the Oval Office meeting. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and let's talk about the clown show. President Donald Trump met with a band of schmoes. What an embarrassing group of people. What an embarrassing group of people. You know, if you are a person in Europe, and let's say you're France or UK or wherever, and you look at these clowns that came to, quote, represent your country, at that point, you got to think about leaving, about just, I don't care where you're going to go. I don't care if it's like Iceland, that would be a good place. Any place I always go back to Malcolm X when he talked about somebody walking up to one of the field slaves and saying, "Do you want to run away?" And the field slave said, any place is better than here, right? I'm thinking if you're in Europe, any place is better than here. It's bad. Okay. I am an American and I have not been happy for a while. We had George W. Bush, and this guy was about as sharp as, I will just say one thing. He was probably smarter than Kamala Harris, but that ain't a high bar, right? Then Obama came in and he looked great and sounded great and all that, but he was just a tool of Wall Street. Nothing more, nothing less, a tool of Wall Street, right? We get Trump one, we get Biden. I don't feel as though I've had a lot of people to be proud of by any stretch of the imagination. But this crew came in on their knees. So they come into Trump, and apparently they have been coaching the Green Goblin, as Alex Christopher likes to call him. They've been coaching this guy to keep his mouth shut and do what he told. He's like, thank you, good, yes, okay, I appreciate it, thank you, good, yes, thank you, good. He was an actor, and they taught him 3 or 4 lines. He repeated his lines over and over and over. That's why they came, because they knew he may be an actor, but he's a lunatic, he's an idiot, and they knew that he couldn't control himself and he'd say something stupid. But they came in to handle the job for him. Okay, let me, I always talk about narratives. When we have a discussion, what's behind the discussion? You know what I mean? How do we view the discussion, the words that are said, the background of the discussion? Here's what I mean. There was a famous guy, I can't remember who it was, but bottom line, I think it was name, but what he said, you give me any, and I'm paraphrasing, you give me any piece of work, give me about 10 pages and I'll tell you when it was written. Was it an Edwardian phrase that they used? If I read something from the Democrats and they're like, yeah, and Putin this or that, I'd be like, okay, he said within 10 years. Okay, that would be probably within 2016 and 2025, because the Democrats were all, so you listen to what's said and you can kind of pick up the background, the context of what's being said, right? So as we discuss what was said here, I want you to think about the background, the discussion, and I'm going to touch on it. In other words, the narratives behind it, because and this is important, because the comments that were made here all supported various narratives. It was an attempt to maintain the narrative, right? And then we got a saying, a guy says, I see a goat, and he says, on the background of what? What do you see on the background of that goat, on the background of that grassy field? And what do you see that grassy field on the background of? On the background of those hills. And what do you see those hills on the background? On the background of the sky. And what do you see the sky on the background of? On the background of consciousness, right? That's the back. Everything eventually ends up to the background of consciousness, right? So here's my point. Let's think about this. One of the things that happened here was Trump has made it clear. And this is when it became clear. when he met with Vladimir Putin, when he respected Vladimir Putin as a legitimate player on the world stage, when Marco Rubio said, hey, look, man, the guy's got freaking nukes. You know what I mean? He's the head of a powerful country. Let's be realistic here, right? When Trump said, hey, they got an army. They defeated Hitler. They defeated, come on. You know what I mean? So basically the Trump team, albeit I'm not saying in favor of their foreign policy, I'm just saying in this instance, they set a stage for a discussion that was not based on a narrative, that was based on physical, kinetic, empirical. You see the way I'm going with real world stuff. Hey, what are we going to do? They got nukes. They can fry us all. Let's be honest about this here. Hey, look, they're winning a war. Come on, they're not going to lose, right? So that's the background that Trump and his team were talking on. Now, I'm not trying to say that they're genuine and that Trump's some kind of a dove and that he's the second coming of Garland Nixon and the peace movement of Code Pink or something. I'm saying I understand that this is the empire, and the empire is still going to do empire things. It's going to try to rule the world. It's going to take other areas to try to destroy Russia and China. That's a given. We all know that. But let's talk about this one particular instance. Decisions have been made. And in my opinion, this is the decision that's been made. The United States said, hey, we're going to overthrow the government of Ukraine. We're going to use it to take out Russia. That's the plan. And then we'll go on to our next move, right? And it failed. And they recognize it failed. They're like, crap, that didn't work. Well, let's try something else. But first, let's get this mess cleaned up. That's all it is. Didn't work. We got to try something else. But first, let's clean this mess up. And then we'll try to take them out in a different way. Didn't work. Is what it is. That's they're being realistic. And Russia kind of is too. Russia's kind of like, yeah, you tried to take us out. Yeah, we did. Didn't work. Yeah, kind of didn't. Guess we better clean this mess up. Yeah. Well, I know you're going to try to take us out and destroy us tomorrow. Yeah, we are. But we'll burn that bridge when we come to it. As for now, let's get this mess cleaned up, and then we'll go forward. And the Americans are like, fair enough. Let's get it done. But then you got the clown show in the EU who can't handle that for a number of reasons. But so the Trump team and the Russians are having a discussion based on a background of kind of a mutual agreement. You tried to take us out and you lost. Yep, we did. And we did. That's, that's two men sitting there. We had a fight and we lost, and I'm still going to try to get you, but it didn't work. Okay, I'm a man, you're a man. It is what it is. You can see Trump, it was almost like, you ever hear like, watch these movies and and this has been real life where like two big, ego generals, and their armies are fighting and one wins or one loses. They capture the other general and the general brings them in the tent and they have a meal and they have wine and he has great respect for his opponent. Hey, we defeated you. Yeah, you defeated us. And they talk about, and this man has respect. This is his enemy. And they both respect each other. How you had great battle plans. Yeah, sure did. We had a few weaknesses, but you guys overcame them, blah, 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 blah. It is what it is, right? I kind of think there's that there. I think there's a little bit of that there. So now it's, all right, we got to clean up the mess. That's all it is. And then we'll be back next week to try to take you out and we'll be waiting. You know what I mean? Hey, we didn't get you this time, but we'll be back next week to try to get you down. Yeah, I know you will. Yeah, we will. You know it'll fail again next time, though. No, it won't. Well, we will see. Yeah, I guess we will see. That's the game. That's the reality, right? Okay. And the Europeans ain't there. They ain't there. And Trump and Putin both realize, it's checkmate. They both realize where we are. They're like, this is where we are. Let's do this thing. Okay. So if you recall, or maybe you don't know, but hopefully you do. If not, then I'll make you aware of it. In December of 2021, when the Russians put forth a document to NATO and blah, 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 and they says, look, we got a list of things we need to talk about. And if this doesn't happen, we're going to kick Ukraine right in the ass. It's like what they said was there could be military/technical responses. In other words, Ukraine's going to get it. And now the then chief of NATO, I don't remember which putz it was, right? Rutenberg or something, whatever. And he said, Russia doesn't get a say in this. And at that time, the U.S. and Blinken went, that's not even the starting place. And Russia's like, well, okay, then Alrighty. And the war started. And I remember when the NATO, whoever the chief was, says, this will be decided on the battlefield. And Sergei Lavrov said, perhaps you haven't looked at Russia's record on the battlefield, right? In other words, we're going to commence to kick some ass here. It's what we do, but some people got to learn the hard way. Some people learn the easy way. Some people only learn through pain. Apparently, you got to learn through pain again. Every 100 years, you dumbasses, it's Napoleon, it's Hitler, now it's Zelensky. Every 100 years, you jackasses got to send some proxy from the West to try to take us out. We got to beat the living hell out of them. And then you know how to act. Some people don't know how to act until they get their asses kicked. As long as you get all huffy and puffy and think you're tough, oh, we're going to get those Ruskies this time. And when we whip your ass, then you can know how to act. You can settle down and act like you got some sense for another 100 years. If that's the way it's got to be, that's the way it's got to be. We know the game. We're willing to play it if we have to. So enter Azov. The Russians commenced to kicking ass and taking names. Okay, so at some point, the Trump guy's like, yeah, okay, what do we do? Now, this discussion, for instance, a ceasefire. The narrative in Europe is the Russians don't get a say. We do what we want. It's the old and the strong do what they can or may, whatever it is, and the weak suffer what they must, right? Which, if you, and I'm paraphrasing, but if you take that old adage to what it actually to how it applies in this particular instance, the Europeans are the ones that are suffering what they must. See, they thought they were the ones that were the strong doing what they can or doing what they will, but they end up being the weak who suffer what they must. And it was a decision. We're going to take you out, Russia. And Russia's like, well, we will just have to see who's the strongest. And whoever's the strongest is the strongest. You can beat us, no problem, but I don't think you can. Okay, so now when they said ceasefire, here's what they're doing. We went to Putin and we said to Putin, darn it, you will give us a ceasefire. And the Russian says, if you can take it, but you can't, can you? So the answer is no. All right, well, in that case, we want a ceasefire, the Russians. In that case, no. All right, fair enough. Then we're going to demand a ceasefire. Now, how about that? We're demanding a ceasefire. And the Russians are like, yeah, sure. What part of go to hell didn't you understand? Oh, well, sorry. We're busy killing Ukrainians. We'll call you when we're done. So at that point, at some point, the Russians talked with Trump. And because Trump was like, yeah, ceasefire. I got my name Kellogg here. And Kellogg saying ceasefire. We got to have a ceasefire. And he went to Putin and he says, ceasefire. And Putin's like, look, Trump, you live in the real world. These clowns over here, they're clowns. Trump was like, yeah, they are. Okay, here's where we are. I just got to tell you this. I'm going to be square with you, buddy. Yeah, we're never going to do the ceasefire. Oh, let me show you a map of the battlefield. Trump says, okay, let me look. Holy be Jesus. That's the battlefield. Hey, take it with you. Show it to your friends. Go over it, whatever you want to do. I'm just saying that's where we are. And if I wanted to do a ceasefire, yes, I'm a powerful man and I got 87% of the vote, but I'd be out of office. I can't do it if I want to. You understand that. The Epstein files, Trump's like, ooh, yeah, the Epstein files. I kind of really do get it. You couldn't do it if you wanted to. Correct. Okay. So Trump comes back, and at that point, he's in the real world. Hey, ain't no point in trying to ceasefire stuff. The Russians said it ain't going to happen. Okay. So these clowns come in. Yes, a ceasefire would be great, and a ceasefire is be good. I mean, Trump has said to him, no ceasefire. Nah, no ceasefire. Oh, no ceasefire? Yeah, no possibility of a ceasefire? Correct. You know, a ceasefire would be good. Don't you think a ceasefire? We all agree that a ceasefire would be good. Yeah, a ceasefire would be great, President Trump. You know, that's what we need is a ceasefire. Trump's just sitting there going, alrighty. So at some point, Trump didn't say, no. He just, okay. So then it went to security guarantees. Yes, what we need is security guarantees. Now, we're not saying that Ukraine should be in NATO, but I guess we're saying NATO should be in Ukraine.
Coming up next on Arts Express.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of
Cell phones go in the microwave.
Dare I ask why?
It blocks UHF frequencies.
Before we get onto the stories, I need to know more about you.
I'm 29 years old. I work as a private contractor for the NSA, for the CIA. I've worked in various jobs in the intelligence industry for the last 9 years. Listen, they're gonna come for me. And now that we've made contact, they're gonna come for all of you too.
How about we just start with your name, okay?
My name is Edward Joseph Snowden.
when the saints go marching in.
What was it you were doing again?
Doing analysis for the State Department.
Don't be shy.
I don't want anyone else.
I wanna be
The modern battlefield is everywhere.
How is this all possible?
Think of it as a Google search, except instead of searching only what people make public, we're also looking at everything they don't.
I know about your conversations.
What is this?
Leave that there.
Are they watching us?
The house is bugged.
By who?
One man can stop the motor of the world.
What was it about this job that makes it more important than your life?
Snowden has been charged with espionage.
You have no idea what it's like to be accountable for other people's lives.
Are you going away?
when the saints go marching in.
And those were scenes from Snowden, Oliver Stone's real-life political thriller about NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden's escape to freedom in Russia a decade ago, where he still resides in exile. And actress Melissa Leo, who portrays investigative filmmaker Laura Poitras, a key figure in championing Snowden, is our guest this week on the show. And Leo, who has appeared in multiple portrayals on both sides of the law, from her start in Miami Vice to 21 Grams, in a conversation about the police state, whether political or racist, in her latest role as a sinister cop, and her victims, a terrorized Black family in The Knife. First, some scenes from The Knife, then Melissa Leo.
I asked my grandma once, what happens when you make a bad choice?
She's on the ground bleeding to death.
Is that her knife?
No.
The police, they'll look at us and they'll look at her and they'll come to their own conclusions.
All you have to do is tell the truth, right?
Police!
Gonna need to speak to each of you. Shouldn't take very long. Tell me what happened here tonight.
I heard a noise, came into the kitchen, and that woman was standing there. She attacked me.
That knife, did you recognize it? We have a few of them, so. Oh, so it's one of yours. I know you're scared. The truth here is everything.
What are you thinking?
I don't know. Questioning a minor, mother is present. Did your dad say what happened?
Wait, don't say a word.
Kendra?
I don't understand why you're trying to talk to her without me.
My grandma used to say, life presents choices, and choices lead to consequences.
Hello.
Hello, Prairie.
Hi. Hello, Melissa Leo, and welcome to our show again.
Thank you.
What were the challenges for you of sustaining that delicate balance in the knife in portraying Detective Carlson between a perceived villain and someone who feels positive about herself and her work in the film?
That's very interesting. Yeah, I never concepted it that way. What I did was what Namdi asked me to do, which was to come and play her, which means I'm playing a homicide detective who's doing her job. As far as she knows, she's been called into a probable homicide. And so she needs to figure out and very quickly realizes there's the whodunit.
And what are your thoughts about the knife as a reflection of the state of race relations and the way things are in this country today?
I think that The Knife is a fresh, new kind of a film that's telling a story. It's a story. It's not a slice of life, but it is full of realities of the day and times in which we live. And it's not surprising to Detective Carlson that this little family is terrified.
Now, you yourself, you've played both sides of the law, and especially on the other side in your unforgettable performance in Frozen River. So how would you say you go about switching those sides, opposite sides of the law, as an actor? How do you do that?
Well, I guess the thing about it is I don't really take sides, right? What I do is I take on the character, and my opinions, my tastes, my thoughts and ideas are irrelevant. The character and what their circumstances, objectives, it's acting 101. That's what you do. You build a character and you reside inside the character. It's not about my taste and opinion in the least. Never.
And in terms of the challenges and rewards of portraying real people in your movies, what did it mean to you to play Oscar Prize winner and Pulitzer Prize winner Laura Poitras, an investigative journalist and filmmaker in Oliver Stone's Snowden?
Oh, what a sweet question. What an honor to play Laura. Oh, yeah. My God. And then I got to meet her, which I didn't think was going to happen. And I seemed to get a nod from her head that it was all right. I was going to play her. Yeah, she's a brilliant woman, and that was a joy to play her. I'm not in that much of that film, but I'm there, and I was shooting the whole time, just as Laura would do. That was a delightful ask by Mr. Oliver Stone to come and work with him. That was a really wickedly awesome job in so many ways, and to feel that there was some. I know that both Joseph and Mr. Stone had a great affinity and caring for Snowden, and so to feel that we were doing something to speak up for him, seemed to be a part of the process as well. I know he meant a great deal to Laura.
And actually, that was my question. What was it like being directed by Oliver Stone, and in light of the way things still are in the real world today?
Yeah, I was delighted to be there on the set with Oliver and see how he works and what he does. When when he called me to do, after we finish shooting, sometimes we need to record some lines afterwards. They call it looping or ADR, right? And so he called me and he asked me if I could put down a couple of lines just on my cell phone. He said that would be fine. But the very first thing Mr. Stone said to me when he said, I kind of missed you, didn't I? Because I was shooting, like the whole time, I'm Laura, almost the whole time, I have her camera in my hands. And I sort of didn't, I think he could have used a little more footage on me, and he didn't get it. So that's okay.
And what have been the challenges for you in prevailing as a woman in the film world through the decades? And you're one of these rare actresses who has not been pressured to reinvent yourself, and you express yourself your way in that film world. What have been those challenges?
Well, that's it. You've just named the challenge. I am a woman in this business. I am not going to portray women that I don't feel are true to women I know or don't know, but I'm not going to play fake women. I'm not going to play women who are the invention of a guy. It's just the way I was brought up. Blame it on my mom. It is a challenge. It is a challenge to be a woman in the world. I would prefer to not see it that way, but it's totally so. And that, when you say female actor or use the word actress, why then it has to do with what are her measurements and hair color, eye color, blah, blah, blah. And that's just never been what I have to sell or that I'm interested in selling. I'm interested in building characters. From the time I was a very young actress, I've always been interested in character acting.
Yeah. And getting back to the knife, what would you hope to convey to audiences with the knife and with your character, Detective Carlson?
Yeah, what I'm hoping that happens, and I've actually seen it happen, Namdi and I did a lot of traveling with this film to film festivals this past year around the world and in the United States, and there is a conversation to be had, an ongoing conversation to be had about the film, all the little details in it. And it's a film that one might even want to go back and see again after having these conversations. Oh, I see what you mean. So rather than tell anybody what Namdi knows happened in that kitchen that night, what I know Detective Carlson is thinking, I'm interested in people discovering and thinking for themselves from the performances, from the film, what do you think? Well, I think this. It's the conversation.
And is there anything else you're coming up with next?
A little later this year, there's a film called King Ivory. It's like the 5th film I've made with a wonderful young filmmaker, John Swab. King Ivory is a nickname for fentanyl, and it's a beautiful movie about the fentanyl crisis. There's some harsh reality in it. It's not beautiful in that way. It's beautiful in its harshness on a harsh subject.
Ah, okay. And I have one final question. When Melissa Leo looks in the mirror, what does she see?
These days, I wonder what I'm seeing.
I ask this because this is for radio and nobody can see you.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, no, I see my very dark eyes and the dark circles that are usually under the eyes. And I see my face aging now. I proudly will be 65 this September. Happy to have made it thus far. Hope I've got some more. Yeah, here I am. This is me.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Melissa Leo, for joining us on the show.
No, thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
And coming up next on the show, Arts Express Paris correspondent Professor Dennis Bro on the new Manchurian candidates, as the brainwashing of the U.S. masses actually never ended since the Cold War, as depicted in that 1962 political thriller, The Manchurian Candidate. First, some scenes from that Red Scare classic, then Dennis Bro.
Raymond Show, please.
There will be no covering up, sir. No covering up.
We are at war. It's a cold war.
Raymond Show, please.
This is he.
Raymond, why don't you pass the time by playing a little solitaire? Raymond,
Yes, sir.
can you see the Red Queen?
Yes, sir.
Good. 1 week from next Saturday, you will be called for at 11:10 a.m. and taken to the Timothy Swarton Sanitarium, 84 East 61st Street. We want you there for a checkup. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
You may put the cards away now. Goodbye, Raymond.
This is Bro on the Global Cultural Beat, Breaking Glass. Today's episode, Manchurian Candidates. The 1962 film, The Manchurian Candidate, had Lawrence Harvey as the duped U.S. serviceman captured by the North Koreans and taken to China where, and this is the famous word that entered the American lexicon with this film, he was brainwashed. He could now be controlled by a series of commands. His mind and part of his past was no longer his own, and he was programmed for assassination. The film has been read as a piece of Cold War propaganda where the finger pointing at communist brainwashing could be easily pointed back at a corporate-controlled America where its citizens feared they were losing their own consciousness and autonomy, that they were being programmed as part of a well-oiled propaganda machine, but not in the crude way the film depicts the Chinese and Soviets, but in a more sophisticated brainwashing by U.S. capital, trotting out as the ultimate end the consumerist lifestyle, devoid of feelings or goals beyond narrow materialist ones. It should also be pointed out that at the time of the film, the CIA's MK Ultra project, whose goal was actual mind control, was well underway. Today, though, we have Manchurian candidates all over the landscape. Many of them present themselves as liberal elite do-gooders who know they are right, who wear blinders which are much more effective than those on the Lawrence Harvey character. For them, the U.S. and Europe are still the hope of humanity, the endless wars the empire has been waging since its existence, but particularly for the last 20 years, which have rained down death and destruction in the Middle East and elsewhere in the global South, though regrettable, are still necessary, with each new rationale shabbier than the last and more lie-soaked. But still, they sign up for them. They were behind Hillary Clinton's destruction of Libya, the African country with the most well-developed health and education system, because we had to get rid of Gaddafi. They cheered on the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria and the installing of an al-Qaeda chieftain as cleaned-up head of the country, who then proceeded to slaughter whole elements of the population, which they blithely ignore. In France, they accept the rationale that because the decolonizing countries of the Sahel, and particularly the one with the most radical project, Burkina Faso, have sought help from Russia to rid them of the Western-inspired terrorists within their borders, that they are unworthy. These Manchurian candidates are blind to the challenge of the global South for true independence and will instead cheer on the destruction of the country, revealing themselves actually to be carrying on the colonial tradition in new guises. They remain equally blind to the war in Ukraine, where they follow the New York Times account of the war, which started with the Russian invasion on February 24th, 2022, and where there is no context, ignoring the well-documented U.S. involvement in the coup of 2014, the subsequent killing of over 14,000 Russian Ukrainians by the fascist followers of the Nazi Bandera, and the multiple attempts the Russians have made to sue for peace both before and after the special military operation. The Manchurians profess to know nothing, or not want to know anything, about NATO's expansion to the east and the subsequent threat to put long-range missiles in Ukraine, which prompted the Russian action. They follow breathlessly the villainizing of China as undemocratic and the every other day Times stories about how the Chinese Socialist Party is failing, when in fact what is happening every day is that China continues to outdistance the U.S., even in technological superiority, the supposed last gasp of free enterprise through private and expensive AI. China stands as a symbol to the rest of the developing world of how to modernize in an equitable manner, but not to the Manchurians who, as their own democracies grow ever more autocratic, scream about China's lack of one. Each day, the Manchurians, the wealthy liberal elite, grow more and more out of touch with ordinary Americans. The Democratic Party, now recognized as simply a shill for this class, is at the point where the Republicans were in 2016, seen as simply the party of rich white men before Trump came along to mobilize, through lies and false promises, a working-class constituency for that party. The Manchurians, rather than joining what should be their allies, working classes in the U.S. and around the world, instead fiercely resist. Like good Germans in the Nazi era, they remain silent or passive, refusing to understand the world around them, with blinkers that would make the Lawrence Harvey character blush. When Trump essentially declared martial law in Washington, D.C., they were at first up in arms. Here was something they could rally around. But when he then accused them of promoting crime, they backed off. Even when they wake up a tiny bit, as in their newly discovered realization that what has been going on in Gaza for 75 years is inhuman, they propose inane and unrealizable solutions to make it seem like they're doing something, like Europe's Palestinian state, soon to be advanced in France, as the possibility of that state is eradicated and as opposed to an Israel that has equal rights for all. The blinders remain on these Lawrence Harvey lookalikes, and those covering the eyes of this class are more dangerous because they are smug and self-assured in their ability to understand a distorted reality, always believing that their enlightened position is something other than just an economic and cultural elite trying desperately to hold on to what they've got. And this is Bro on the Global Cultural Beat, Breaking Glass.
And now on Arts Express, The Klan on Canvas and the case of artist Philip Guston. Here to sort it all out is political art essayist Sean Grenier.
In 1969, the artist Philip Guston provocatively painted himself wearing the KKK's white hood. In his signature pink studio, we see him smoking and painting a portrait. The simple composition is lit by a light bulb and an open window, and contains art supplies, a clock, and, of course, the artist and his easel. I made a video about 4 years ago on Philip Guston's shoes and their link to the Holocaust, and I want to look more specifically at Philip Guston's depiction of members of the KKK and, more importantly, what it could all mean. Why do they look like inoffensive cartoons? Why are they often seen driving and smoking? And why did Guston paint himself wearing the white hood? I want to thank people who, because I was at an anarchist workshop in Montreal, and a couple of people recognized me, which was super touching. And not only did they recognize me, but they came to talk to me. And we spoke and we hung out. It was amazing. And I'd like to thank these people and say hello. Hi. If we saw each other at the Rafale, which was the anarchist workshop, hello. Thank you for saying hi to me. Philip Goldstein, that's his original name, was born in Montreal. That's where I was born, of Jewish Ukrainian refugees fleeing pogroms. He was still a child when his parents left for Southern California, hoping to find better job opportunities. In the 30s, at the age of 20, he made socially conscious paintings depicting, for example, the KKK. He didn't depict them in his iconic style yet, that would only come decades later, but the sensitivity had been there. Guston worked at the Stanley Rose bookshop in Hollywood, and it's in this bookstore that he'd organize his first exhibition that would greatly influence him. There was this one painting that the John Reed Club, a leftist association, commissioned him to do on the state of black people in America. He painted the Scottsboro Boys, a group of 9 teenagers accused of raping 2 white women in Alabama. I sadly can't show it to you, and I'll explain why soon. There was also the painting Conspirators, which presented Klansmen with the iconic enormous hands that will reappear 30 years later in his career. There's also, in the background, a black man being lynched next to Christ on the cross, making an obvious parallel, which the right obviously didn't appreciate. The reason I couldn't show you the first painting and that the second artwork is a drawing for Conspirators, not the actual painting, is because the Stanley Rose bookshop was raided by the LAPD's Red Squad, a right-wing division of the LAPD which cracked down on California's left wing. Klansmen were everywhere in American society. There were 8 million of them in America in the mid-20s. Assuming that most of them were men and that America's population was of 116 million people in 1925, which would mean that there were 58 million men, then it would mean that up to 14% of American men were Klansmen. As I said, they were everywhere, including in office and in America's police departments. So they raided Philip Guston's exhibition and destroyed his paintings. 2 years later, in 1935, Philip Guston moved to New York and changed his name to Philip Guston. Keep in mind, we often associate the KKK as being anti-black, which they absolutely were, but their hatred wasn't limited to black people. They were against leftists and other civil rights activists, of course. They were also against queer people, Catholics, immigrants, and Jewish people. This made Philip Guston an obvious target for the KKK as a Jewish immigrant who, through his art, was standing up for social causes. But in New York, Philip Guston, with his newly changed name, also changed his art style. He was heavily influenced by abstract expressionists such as Jackson Pollock, who he went to high school with back in California. He became an abstract expressionist and gained fame and recognition as an abstract expressionist. It was only in the late 1960s that Guston went back, controversially, to figurative painting. Amidst the social upheaval of the period, the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the second wave feminist movement, the student movement, the queer movement, the Native American rights movement, the counterculture in general, Guston, and I believe rightfully so, felt like it was inappropriate to paint abstractly. The war, what was happening to America, the brutality of the world. What kind of man am I, sitting at home, reading magazines, going into frustrated fury about everything, then going into my studio to adjust a red to a blue? This brings us to his figurative works and his depiction of the KKK. Speaking of his images of the KKK more specifically, he said, "I was painting common objects and so on, and the Democratic Convention took place in 1968, and like everybody else, I was very disturbed about it. It seemed to connect with way back in the 30s when I was just beginning to paint. The Klan was very powerful in LA in those years." In one sentence, the 1968 Democratic Convention was very tense because the Democratic establishment was torn on the Vietnam War, while younger liberals and leftists were against it, which sparked protests and severe police repression. Things don't really change, do they? Anyway, I want to dive into these works by breaking down 2 elements which they often share in common. Let's start with bloodstains. Bloodstains are some of the only elements of overt violence in these paintings. They're either subtle, like in City Limits, or a bit more pronounced, like in Riding Around, or a central element to the work, like in this untitled 1969 work. In this one, you see a Klansman covered in blood splatters, the red contrasting with the white hood and background. The violence isn't only implied by the blood though, he's also holding up a whip. It isn't the only painting with a whip. In Bad Habits, a pair of blood-stained Klansmen seem to indulge in bad habits, noticeably alcohol, and the one on the right is holding up a whip. However, he's not using it as an instrument of repression. He seems to be whipping himself. In remorse, we see another Klansman embarrassed, and though he's not whipping himself, his white hood turns red out of shame. Bloodstain and whips aren't the only elements gesturing to violence. In Edge of Town, Guston shows pieces of wood with nails sticking out of them. They might be coming back from doing some renovations, but chances are, and this is only implied, that they're using this piece of wood as a weapon. In Dawn, the wood planks return, but this time bloodied, with feet sticking out of the trunk of the Klansman's car. Violence here is depicted a bit more frontally, but not as frontally as in Bad Times. In it, Klansmen are driving their car, but this time they're holding a gun. It seems to depict a drive-by shooting. The victims' bodies are hidden by a curtain, and, a bit like in Dawn, only their legs and feet are sticking out. This violence is an extremely important theme in this series of paintings, as it's the very reason why Guston is making these works in the first place. However, although this series is, in part, about denouncing the racist violence of the KKK, which Guston had been a victim of decades before their production, this series seems to trivialize this violence. There's a nonchalance, a casualness to this racist American violence, which Guston is putting on display. This nonchalance is conveyed through cartoons. Guston depicts his Klansmen and other objects extremely cartoonishly. None of these Klansmen are scary or eerie, except perhaps this one, which is untitled and made between 1968 and 1969. Some characteristics of this painting are shared by his other paintings, the simple color palette and the dotted lines, but we rarely, if ever, see Guston's Klansmen look at us so intensely. Take Riding Around, for example, or City Limits. It shows 3 Klansmen in a tiny car. I've heard it being compared to a clown car to show how absurd it looks. They're kind of cute, riding together, compacted together. I can just imagine their legs touching. Even the cars in which they ride are comical with their asymmetrical tires, and they remain comical even if the subject matter is gruesome. There's also something adorable about the slits in their hoods, which look like naive, beady eyes and which add to the clumsiness and goofiness of their characters. The car and the cigarettes, specifically, 2 elements that I noticed reappear often in this series, contribute to turn these paintings into casual scenes. The subjects are supposed to be hateful men, but they're also doing everyday things, driving, perhaps having a stroll with friends, and smoking cigarettes. They're just dudes smoking and driving. They could be your brother, neighbor, or friend. So these 2 elements, the violence represented by bloodstains and the casualness represented by cartoons, are kind of conflicting. Why would anyone want to represent this violence so nonchalantly? Why would anyone want to represent a white supremacist group in this way? To understand if Guston is trying to make the Klansmen likable, we need to ask ourselves why he painted them in the first place. Alright, so why did Philip Guston paint Klansmen? There are many reasons why he could have done it, and I'll point to some of those reasons, but Guston himself said, "They are self-portraits. I perceive myself as being behind the hood. The idea of evil fascinated me. I almost tried to imagine that I was living with the Klan. What would it be like to be evil?" The idea of it being a self-portrait is confirmed by Philip Guston's The Studio, perhaps the most popular of the series and the painting we opened with. He might be displaying some radical empathy by trying to put himself in the shoes of evil people, people who committed a hate crime and trashed his very first exhibition. But there could be another way in which this could be a self-portrait. Art historian Donald Cuspit links the artist wearing a hood to his Jewish identity. Guston's change of name, the way he repressed his Jewish identity to protect himself, was a response to traumatic circumstances and could have been something he was deeply ashamed of. There's something to be said about the hood not only symbolizing the violence of the KKK, but also the loss of identity which a hood, or a mask, can represent. The fact that the mask he's wearing is one which represents white supremacy, that he's changing his name to a white passing name, assimilating himself to the whiteness of America, could symbolize, to follow what Cuspit's saying, that Guston feels like he contributed to white supremacy in America by doing exactly what the KKK wanted him to do: erase his Jewish identity. However, to me, these Klansmen are most powerful not as Philip Guston's self-portrait, nor as symbols of self-suppression within a white supremacist framework, but as symbols for racism. That's what Guston did, placing himself in the position of a Klansman, not to legitimize the Klan or make it look cool — they definitely don't look cool — but to represent our biases and prejudices that we carry with us as a result of our upbringing, and to represent how casual and mundane these biases can feel like when you grow up with them and are surrounded by them. Guston is taking this casualness and mundaneness and turns it against his audience. While the hoods hide the true identity of the Klansman, Guston identifies a veil that covers not only the Klansman, but all of society. By revealing the hoods, he's paradoxically unveiling our apparently post-racial society. And for a man who gave up abstract art to make paintings that fight power and denounces the state of the world, I feel like seeing Guston's Klansmen as a repudiation of the KKK would be reductive and would greatly diminish Guston's art. This isn't a KKK equals bad painting. That wouldn't be confronting. Guston did more than that. If to be considered racist you need to wear a hood, then a lot of people wear hoods and they're just not willing to admit it, and these paintings confront us by holding up a mirror and showing us exactly that.
And that's all we have time for today on Arts Express, expression in the arts. And if you'd like to express yourself too, you can write to us at theradiogoddess@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Prairie Miller leaving the station.